It's Tuesday, November 5th, 2019. This is the Pro and Con Show, and I'm your host, Michael James Ott. Welcome to yet another show. So Tuesday, November 5th. All right, so the purpose of the show is to encourage us to be better citizens, to be at least open to listening to opposing views and that kind of thing. I very often look at different information channels on the internet, places like Breitbart and CNN and so on, to kind of see how the bias of the same news events is handled differently by these different information streams. But today, and there's a lot of ongoing stuff about the impeachment of Mr. Trump. So lots and lots of coverage of that, and it's all incremental and somewhat repetitive because the information is the same, just being confirmed by more and more witnesses and testimonials that this information is coming out. And as I said in previous shows, no reason why we can't be working on and talking about issues that affect us. And so today I want to talk about, today's show I call Taxing. And what I want to talk about is, tax reform. Tax reform. So I'm going to actually hold this slide here steady for just a minute or two. Not a minute. But I want the opportunity for you to kind of read through my bullet points here. Okay. So let me talk to this slide. Right now, our tax structure, the tax law, is unbelievably complicated. It is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, if not thousands and thousands of pages. There's all kinds of forms and deductions, and it just goes on and on and on. The complexity of our tax system, and I offer to you that the reason why it's so complex is because over the course of decades, we've had various politicians and groups of politicians who very often acted in their own interests. I'll give you an example. So back in the day when I was in the United States Navy, I was on a nuclear submarine, and the submarine I was on, a ballistic missile submarine, actually had two crews. So one crew would take the ship for 120 days or something, and then the other crew, or maybe it was 90 some days. Anyway, something like that, 90 some days, I guess it was. And then the other crew would take it and back and forth. Well, while the one crew was on the submarine and then ultimately taking it to sea for various missions at sea, the other crew was ashore and going through some training and stuff like that. But and what it meant was that because there are two crews, you really could not stay on board the ship or the boat. And one of the tax laws that have been passed, and may or may not still be in effect, I haven't looked, to be quite honest, is that they passed laws where if you had to maintain two residences or an additional residence because of the work that you do, you could take off the costs of or deduct some of the costs of having that secondary residence. And who passed that law and why? It was passed by Congress for congressmen. So because very often, if let's say you're from Iowa, just arbitrary, and you end up being a representative in the House of Representatives, well, you spend so much time in Washington, D.C., that it makes sense for you to have a second residence there. And so what that means, though, is that other people, and for example, other people in the United States Navy back in the day would take this deduction, a significant deduction on this secondary homeowner kind of thing. And whether you agree with it or not, I personally did not. I never. I just thought no. because in my view, I wouldn't have lived on a submarine anyway. But that's beyond the point. Is these different exceptions, just kind of grew and grew and grew, and every time there's a new one, well, then there's more, lines of legal stuff and more complexity, and the greater capability to bypass or go through the so-called loopholes. You hear this term loopholes all the time. There's loopholes in the law. And it's because we have passed so many laws that you end up where people who you really, or most of us, we really want to be paying taxes aren't paying taxes because they spend the extra time and effort to avoid them by finding loopholes through the tax law. And what does that mean? Well, it means that, for example, a wealthy person who's making a great deal of money, their so-called tax rate might be 35%, let's say. And in theory, they should be paying 35% taxes, but in fact, they pay no tax. And why is that? Well, because they figured out how to manipulate the system, manipulate their earnings, and how to label it and configure it so that in the end they as far as the tax law is concerned, they effectively are not making any money. And although their bank accounts are growing and their personal worth is increasing tremendously. So this is the thing that we are at and where we are. And so a lot of discussion about how we pay for the government, and we have a lot of debt. So right now the budget is unbalanced, and we're spending a lot more than we're taking in taxes, so that the national deficit is growing really at an alarming rate of roughly $1 trillion a year at the moment, and that's unbelievable, given that the economy is actually doing pretty darn well, and the unemployment rate's quite low, and on and on and on. Normally, when the economy is doing this well and the unemployment rate is low and so on, you would have excess, but we've done reverse, and it's because we're drunken partiers. We've got our credit card out and we're spending money, but no one's planning on paying the bill in the long term. Anyway, back to tax reform. So all the complexity of doing the taxes, and what is and is not a tax deduction, and how that changes, and all that stuff needs to be greatly simplified. And in fact, so simplified that it's automatic. So what I am suggesting here, and if you read the bullet points here, is mega simplify the tax code. And I did some back of the envelope calculations. So I looked at things like the total income of Americans, and the total income of businesses, and so on. And I came up with, if you add together, if you look at the percent of federal spending versus the total income of businesses and individuals, and then on a state level, percentage of or typical state taxes that they use to run their businesses, and on, or not their businesses but their governments, and then add in Social Security, and also add in healthcare. So a fundamental layer of healthcare. We could, if everybody paid, if every dollar that you made, you paid roughly 28%, and it's going to be plus or minus a couple percent, but roughly 28%. You pay 28%, and you get your federal taxes taken care of, your state taxes taken care of, your Social Security contributions taken care of, and your health care, all 28%, as long as we all gave, all the time, no exceptions, no loopholes, okay? And so what does that mean? Well, it means that, if you're, let's say you're doing extremely well in a business or something, and you're making $50 million a year, well, you're going to pay 28 cents on the dollar for that $50 million, and you're going to pay it. And yes, you're going to contribute more than people making $50,000 to Social Security, for example, and you're going to contribute more to the road systems and on and on and on. But why is that all right? Well, one is you're still incented for every dollar. So if you're worried about, the incentive of people want it, well, if we tax too much at the upper levels, they won't want to spend more money and so on. Well, or reinvest in the economy. Well, if you're getting 72 cents on the dollar for everything that you make, that's plenty of incentive to keep investing in it, to keep trying to grow your business and so on. And then as far as paying more, well, one, you can certainly afford it, right? But secondly, the more that you're making, the more you're garnering the benefits of being in the U.S. economy. It's your ability to access transportation and education and luxury items and healthcare and is much higher, and so it's actually appropriate that you would pay more because you're basically accessing much more, and you're getting much more benefit than a lot of people would. So why not? And then the other key thing then is that you have this 20% tax rate, and you can, and again, it could be off by a couple percent one way or the other, but essentially that, and it's basic. So no more, don't have to worry about the IRS anymore. The average American, even corporations, they could get rid of probably 90% of their finance teams and stuff like that, or 80% or something, because all of the tax stuff would all go away. It'd be very, very straightforward, reporting and paying your taxes going forward. And then, there would be programs, just like there are today, that maybe we decide as a community, as a country, a society, that we want to give some support, some help to disadvantaged people. So maybe re-education programs, or food programs, or housing programs, all these kinds of things. Well, that's fine, but not in the tax code. They don't go in the tax code. That's okay. So then if we want to assist homeless people, then we don't give them tax breaks if they file taxes. What we do is we have programs that we pay for with the taxes that we're gathering from this very simplified tax system. And and so it separates stuff, and then we know it's very simple to understand. This is our aggregate income, very easy to forecast, very easy to understand. And now here's the spending against that income. And if we wanted to, we could even do like a balanced budget thing where from year to year, maybe that 20%, varies from year to year depending on the economy and our spending. And maybe one year it's 29.5%, and the next year it's 28% because of, the fluctuations in our economy's doing, and the associated spending that we're doing with our governments. But that would all be very, easily understood and easily planned for compared to what we have today. All right, so I'm an advocate of greatly simplified taxes. I think that the way to tax the rich, if you will, is to continue to force them, eliminate all the loopholes, and everybody pays the same percentage of every dollar that they make, but the rich just keep paying that same percentage forever. And the poorer people, if we decide that we want to give them, and we probably do, some of the poorest people certainly, we can give them assistance, but not in the tax code. We provide it by actual legislation of funding that would use the taxes that we're collecting and give it or provide it, hand up, re-education, all those kinds of things to those most needing it. All right, so for Tuesday, November 5th, 2019, this is Michael James Ott, Pro and Con Show. Another show on Wednesday, November 6th. Look forward to talking to you then, and until then, bye for now.